Wednesday, March 1st, 2017, 7 p.m. I call to order the regular meeting of the Oregon City Commission to order. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Ide? Here. Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Mengelberg? Here. Mayor Holliday?
Here. So please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, I have to admit, this is a first even for me. So we are at, there we go.
We'll be right with you.
17137, the oath of office for the Oregon City Police K-9 F Officer Grendel. The police chief and public safety director, Mr. Band, is apparently exercising his constitutional right to fish today. So we have Mr. Captain Clure is representing the police department. Mr. Clure?
Yes. This is Jason Pohl, who has been a police officer with us for about 3 years, but he's been a cop for 9 years. He came to us from the city of Seaside. And his new companion partner here is Grendel. He is a new dog we acquired, and he's strictly a dope dog. So he only smells for cocaine, methamphetamine, or heroin.
And dumb people?
Yeah.
Not turkey.
He's been in service for a couple of weeks. He's had 8 deployments so far, and he's batting 100% so far. So we're excited to have him on board, and should be a great asset to the department and the city.
Can you find my remote? That's the question. All right, let's do this.
I'm going to swear him in.
Kneel down.
Are you going to shake his paw?
I'm pretty sure. I'm not going to stick my hand in front of that dog. That's for sure.
It's going to be rough.
Buddy, what's going on?
You can probably shake his paw.
We can do that afterwards. So I guess can you transfer that to your other hand? Oh no, you're right. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Grendel. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Oregon, and I will, to the best of my ability, faithfully perform the duties of police officer for Oregon City, Oregon during my incumbency thereof. During my incumbency thereof.
Yes.
Apparently that's an I do.
Don't look at him. Don't look at him.
Commissioner Shaw.
I think that's a strike. We're going to have to
All right, that's enough. That's more fun than I
Yeah, here we go.
No. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Can you come and meet us? Yeah, you can come around.
Picture. Come on, bud. Where's he going?
Picture taken.
Oh, she's bad.
This is all he cared about.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Good luck.
So who's the notary?
Thank you, yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
That's me.
Oh, okay.
I'll do it later.
All right. Okay. So next we have 17151 Father's Heart Weekly Cleanup Program update provided by Mark Murdoch and the Community Care Team. Welcome.
Thank you.
So at least a couple of you need to come up to the mic.
Come on up, team. Thank you for inviting us here this evening, Mayor. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about really what I view as a partnership between the Father's Heart Street Ministry and the City of Oregon City. As you may notice, we're wearing some gear here that was funded by Oregon City. This is our safety vest, And you can see on the back it has the Father's Heart logo and emblem. And here is a poncho with similar logo and the Father's Heart name on it.
Nice.
This was funded here for our start of our initiative in October of this year. And excuse me, I've gone away from the mic. But Oregon City funded this to allow us to be part of an initiative that is aimed to basically, we call ourselves the Community Care Team, and our purpose is to be able to give back to Oregon City. And it's important that we as an organization here in Oregon City have an opportunity to show that the homeless want to give back in a very demonstrative way to the city. And so our initiative is that we go and clean up trash throughout the city. We do it currently once a week. And we've been doing this since the beginning of October. And we've typically collected about 2 to 3 50-gallon bags of trash each week. We've been working very closely with the police chief, Chief Bund, on some of the hot areas for trash within the city. And so one of the areas that he's had concern about is basically cleaning up from the promenade along Clackamas Drive down to Clackamas Park. And so we've done that about 3 times. And then we've done many weeks, have tried to identify some of the hot spots within the city and cleaned up trash there, like under the railroad tracks. We clean up kind of through the downtown and down to the Westland Bridge, and then come back up really around the City Hall here, and then down Washington Street and back to the center. But we're hoping that this is just the start of even a more major activity where we can involve more of the homeless from the center to help improve the beauty of Oregon City. So with me here this evening are some of the team members: Albert Belmont, Sandy Love, David Kleinke, and Dexter Brown. The other objective of our team is really to improve the image of the homeless. We really think, when I say we, many of you know that Terry Gant, who she and I were the ones who talked about having this type of initiative. Terry passed away on January 1st of this year. She was the founder of the Father's Heart Street Ministry. And I know all these people here are serving in Terry's memory because this was so important to her that we all want to continue this effort to really improve the image of the homeless, because I've gotten to know these folks since I've come here to the Father's Heart. And these are people who really are good people, and we want to convey to the public at large that these people, while homeless, are citizens who want to contribute to the city just like any other citizen. And so being able to present a positive image of the homeless is really a second key objective for our initiative. So at this point, we've been going since the 1st of October. And we hopefully will be expanding this to get more and more of our members from the Father's Heart involved in this over time. We think it's a way to give back to the city and a way to develop people who are receiving services from our center. And so we hope we can have a continued partnership with the city here on this initiative, and we really appreciate the funding that we receive for both these safety vests and for the ponchos.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you very much, all of you, for what you're doing and showing us that you, just as we are all contributing members of our community, that you are as well. And even though your resources may be different than some others, your heart is in the right place, and we're really grateful for that. So thank you.
Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah, thanks so much for what you're doing out there. And the city has provided this, but to be more specific, actually the ponchos came out of the police fund.
Yes.
These are the folks that did all this. I mean, we want to take credit for this, but these are the guys
Right.
that did all that. So I wanted to make sure they got the recognition for that because that was a great thing. How many do you have on your team? Is this kind of it here? Or do you have more? Is it fluctuating?
No, we have
About
more.
6.
We have a couple more who are not here this evening.
There's 6
Um,
of us.
Who've been going consistently every week. And so we view this, at least in my mind, as kind of the first phase of this program, where we kind of pick some of our people who we thought would really do a good job with this, would be consistent. And so we're hoping that the next phase will expand this to more and more people from our center.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really want to thank you for your good work. It's a little discouraging that there's that much trash around to pick up, and you're making a dent, so really appreciate it. This is a really meaningful and concrete way to demonstrate your support.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, guys.
Very much.
All right.
And I should say thanks to Chief Bund again, who's been, very supportive of us from the very beginning. He was there at our kickoff day and who's really supported us, all along. So thank you.
Thank you.
So before we move on, I have to ask this question. Do we have any liability?
Do you have any liability for providing the?
No, not that so much as the actual work that they're doing in any.
I mean, as I understand it, they're not employees. Are we supervising their activities, telling them where to go, or doing anything? It seems unlikely that there would be any liability if we don't have them as employees. We don't control or direct what they do. Having said that, people have sued for far less of a connection.
Well, I just had to ask the question.
Sure. No, I mean, I think the key thing is for, be concerned about liability, but do what's right, and we can handle liability and make arrangements as best we can. But since they're not working for the city or volunteering for the city, it seems very unlikely that we'd have liability in this circumstance.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, I have one appointment to, I got to dig through my stuff here, the Transportation Advisory Committee, actually 3, reappointing Bob LaSalle and, I'm going to butcher this, Sedomir Jessic? Sedomir Jessic. Well, I'm close. To the Transportation Advisory Committee for a 3-year term ending December 31st, 2019. An appointment of Edward Lyman to the Transportation Advisory Committee for a 3-year term ending December 31st, 2019. Moving on, citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments? Okay. Then, is everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes.
Then we'll move on to public hearings. PC 17-021, request for continuance of AN 16-0004 and ZC 16-0001, annexation and rezoning of 35.65 acres of north of Holcomb Boulevard and west of Winston Drive. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The Planning Commission is still reviewing this item, and because of that, we're requesting a continuance. And rather than the date stated in the agenda, we would actually like to request a continuance based off a newest request from the applicant to April 5th. So the request is for continuance for this item from today until April 5th.
Questions? Motion?
Move to approve PC 17-021 for continuance till April 5th.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Shaw, seconded by Commissioner Ide. Further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. So once my computer refreshes, we're on to general business. We have none. Anybody want to pull anything off the consent agenda?
Nope.
Nope.
Motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Ide, seconded by Commissioner Mengelberg. Further discussion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Mangelberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. And I believe we are on to communications, unless yes, that's correct. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. We're going to start with an update from Mr. Kabizman as it relates to the
Senate Bill 1573.
Senate Bill 1573 and the decision down in Benton County.
So, Mayor, Commissioners, as you know, the last legislative session adopted Senate Bill 1573, which essentially eliminated the requirement to vote on certain annexations that a number of cities have in their charter. And there have been a number of challenges to it in a variety of different circumstances. And the primary one was down in Benton County with the city of Corvallis, which has a very similar language in their charter as Oregon City does. It says, unless otherwise mandated by law, then citizens have to vote on any annexations. And what happened in Benton County is that the court said that the otherwise mandated by law means something like Senate Bill 1573, and so that essentially, if in fact a annexation proposal meets requirements of 1573, the city cannot send it to the voters, but has to approve it and go forward from there. The court went on to address a couple cities, in particular Lake Oswego and Molalla, which had a charter provision requiring votes and did not have a unless otherwise required by law provision. And the court said even in that case, they're required to follow 1573. Essentially, what it relied on was there are a number of cases that talk about annexation, and what they say is that the annexation, there is no home rule authority to annex property outside the boundaries. The home rule authority is within the city, but when you bring in, the annexation process itself is bringing new stuff in, and that authority to annex only comes from the legislature, not from home rule authority. And therefore, the legislature can set the authority for annexation and the procedures the city must follow, and there's no constitutional right to vote on annexations. So essentially, the state legislature can truncate the procedures. Long and short of it is that we have to file 1570. The Benton County Court has decided that cities have to follow 1573. That's not binding on Clackamas County. In talking to some of the attorneys involved in the case, it's pretty clear that it's going to be appealed, which means it's about another 2 years or so before we're going to get a definitive word that would bind us. But that's the most recent pronouncement by courts in the state, is that 1573 is good law and that cities should follow it when annexations occur, if it meets the criteria. And of course, obviously, it's got to be within an urban growth boundary. It's got to meet the land use requirements. And there's a third contiguous. Thank you. And so, we've got a few of those working their way through our system. Any
questions?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
So the decision was based on the fact that there's no home rule by the city, no home rule authority by the city for annexations outside the city, which is usually the nature of annexations. Was that based on existing precedent, or is this a new decision?
No, that came from Mid-County Future Alternatives Committee versus City of Portland, a 1990 case. Okay. But I would, that's sort of the fallback, and the court only addressed that because of Molalla and Lake Oswego. I would what the court actually said that would apply to us, because we have that unless otherwise mandated by state law, is that this 1573 is mandated by state law.
Did the court speak to a previous objection that phrase only referred to law that was in effect at the time of 1999 and before, I believe?
It did. It spoke to that specifically and said that that's not the case, that the question remaining after applying the rationale is whether a state statutory exemption must have been enacted at the time the annexation amendments were approved by voters. And it said, no, it doesn't matter when that state mandate comes in, whether it's before the annexation or before the charter provision was adopted or not.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a question. let's say we approve some of the annexation requests that are before us, and this is appealed to a higher court and is overturned, would what are the repercussions of that? Can they go back and say the voters need to vote?
It sort of depends on how things play out here. I'm going to give the two most likely scenarios I can think of. One is that any annexation we do gets appealed in some fashion, whether to LUBA or to the circuit court. If in fact the LUBA or the circuit court says no, 1573 doesn't work that way, and the cities don't have to follow it, then we'll deal with the repercussions of that. I would expect that if in fact this is on appeal, we'll make our decision, and it will work its way through that process. I think the more interesting case is what happens if in fact we annex property, do not send it to the voters, and there is no appeal, so that then we have a complete annexation, and 2 years later the court comes back and says, 1573 wasn't effective. I think, I haven't looked into this too deeply, so this is, my initial thought on it, is that the annexation is probably complete, and if nobody has timely challenged it, the time to challenge it is likely gone. But that's, off the top of my head, and I'd want to look into that a little bit more closely before give you a definitive answer there.
Thank you.
Well, as unsatisfying as always, Mr. Kabizman.
It's the nature of being an attorney.
So I guess, so what you're saying is if we were to approve an annexation, allow it to go forth, and no one immediately appeals that either to LUBA or to the courts, then it likely down the road the court is going to look at that and say that was already complete?
I think so.
Okay. Other questions?
Well, the flip side of that question is if we were to deny annexation, we can anticipate action on the other side, I presume.
If we deny an annexation, I would assume that our only basis for denial wouldn't have anything to do with 1573. It's not meeting the land use or whatever, and there may be an annexation there. Where that would come up is if we decide we're not going to follow 1573, we're going to send it to the voters regardless. Then, I think we'd have a similar situation if nobody challenged that resolution, send it to the voters, but again, haven't thought through all the consequences of it.
But potentially there would be an appellant from the other side as well on that. I would assume somebody from the realtors or the home builders or someone would take up that cause.
I would imagine that no matter what we do, we're likely to see an appeal. Not likely, but there's a fairly good chance that we're going to see an appeal no matter what we do.
Pretty much everything we do, yeah, okay.
So just to be absolutely clear, the only reason we could deny an annexation request is if we felt it did not meet the land use criteria. We could not use other items like it was voted down twice or three times before as a basis for a decision.
I don't think you could.
It's an important point.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
you could do it on both points. It doesn't meet the 7 criteria, and you can do that, and then the court could examine both of those points.
Yeah.
Correct?
Well, but that's assuming it doesn't meet all 7. If it does meet all 7, do we just do that on principle?
Well,
I think what I'm asking is, the question is whether it meets all 7 or not is an arguable question also.
Okay, well, let's leave that up to that particular public hearing then.
Right.
yeah.
I think, when we discuss these, there's 7 criteria, and the standard is on balance. Does it meet these? And so we can walk through that as these come forward and through the Planning Commission and to the City Commission for your consideration.
We're also required to watch for what's in the public interest. So even if things are, meet all the criteria, that's something that we have to look at as well.
And by saying that, are you speaking about goal number 3 of the City Commission over there, which is enhance the
Enhancing-
livability of the community?
Mhm.
Okay.
note that one of the factors in the annexation criteria is lack of any significant adverse effects on the economic, social, and physical environment of the community by the overall impact of the annexation, and how that plays into previously.
You could drive a bus through that door. All right. Anything else? Okay.
I suppose I could say that one of those criteria is for the future. It talks about the future in those 7 criteria.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to recite that for the record?
Sorry, I just closed it down.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious. I want it all out there for everybody to examine. Not necessarily existing, but future.
You mean the adequacy and availability of public facilities and services to service potential development?
Potential. That's the word
Right.
that's used. Okay.
And in this city, we have a concurrency requirement, correct? We do not. Shocking. Why not?
Meaning what?
That you have to have infrastructure in place in time for development.
Well, in the land use process, the development process we do, there is no required concurrency for annexation.
Right. That makes sense.
As you get closer and closer to development, bring it into the UGB, annex it, zone it, subdivide it, each of those makes that potential development closer, and therefore the services and concurrency requirement gets tighter and tighter.
So when they actually file their land use and building permit, that's when the concurrency kicks in.
For example, if you're doing a subdivision, there will be a requirement to show adequate public facilities, that there is, that
Water,
you actually
sewer,
have
streets.
the sewer that can get there and that the streets can handle the capacity.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving on.
Next, I'd like to have John Lewis give a couple of updates.
At least it was you this time.
I hear the motor running.
So, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Yeah.
The city manager asked for this. He said you were dying for an update. Giving you a little bit of an update on landslides in Oregon City.
I'm going to swear in a slide ruler tonight.
I just can't win around here. I don't know what the deal is, but Katie's bringing it up. So just wanted to go through information that's kind of been hitting the news, so thought we'd go through it with you too a little bit in a little bit more detail. So the good news is we're much better off this year than kind of this time last year, where we were dealing with evacuation of, what was it, 60 some apartments, or tenants. But we are still dealing with Newell Canyon and kind of some of the slide conditions that we have in Oregon City. So this is a map, an excerpt of Oregon City, and it kind of shows the canyons in kind of the shaded areas, and then the purple there represent 5 active slides that we kind of have been monitoring. So up at the top is the slide that's along 14th. It's between 14th and 15th near Jackson, just down the hill from Jackson. That's all but one of these are on private property. So, but we still keep track of them. The other one is along 12th Street, just up the hill or upslope from the Jackson campus. Trillium Park Drive, which is the one that's hit the news. It's right behind the hospital. Peter Skeen, which is one that's actually impacted. It's not in the public right-of-way, but there's a public sanitary sewer line that it is impacted, and so we have that's something we're dealing with on a daily basis on Peter Skeen. And then our most notable slide is the one on Forest Edge, just really between the Forest Edge apartments and the Berry Hill apartments. So a couple of just quick pictures if you haven't seen it already. I know some of you haven't been on site. I don't know if all of you have been on site, but I thought I'd start with the one that's kind of most newsworthy right now, which is the Trillium Park Drive landslide. It's not a massive slide in the sense that some of these slides will show you have a big mud scarp that is large in size. This one's just looks more like a roadway that's in really bad condition. There is a fair amount of ground movement. It has impacted one structure that's been deemed a dangerous building. The tenants have moved out, and we've been working somewhat with those tenants to try and help that situation as well. I know the mayor and the city manager have made some progress on that, so thank you for that. From our perspective, it's been about isolating the public utilities and the franchise utilities that are in a stretch of Trillium Park Drive. So we've abandoned the water line. We're monitoring the sanitary and storm lines to make sure, when and if they come apart, that we have a backup plan for that. So we've got that plan in place, and we've essentially closed the road. So other than that, on this slide, I've got another graphic to show you. But
another graphic of this?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So the location, again, this is kind of another relief map that shows kind of the stream corridor and shows the public utilities. That arching polka dotted line there is kind of the limits of the SCARP area that's starting to move. It crosses the street. You can actually kind of watch the cracking in that arced kind of motion there. It's as if that material is moving to the east or down the canyon. And we know from years of history on this slide, this isn't the first time this area has moved. It seemed pretty stable. In fact, we even did some pavement and sidewalk work this past summer because it had settled down. We were under the impression, we know that there's a deep slide and then a shallower slide, all on the kind of the same thing. So from years past, both the neighboring adjacent property owners, which have been interested in development of some vacant lots there, and the city have added some monitoring wells to kind of try and measure that. And one of the ones that the city had was fairly deep. The reason we know it's such a deep set slide is that we were able to measure that, and it's 60 feet deep. That's where they were recording some movement at 60 feet deep. There's also shallow set slide activity in the same area that has been around some of the utilities. The storm sewer several years ago kind of just contorted into a different shape, and we had to go in and we actually slipped a liner through it, and have continued to use that pipe. And again, the sanitary sewer pipe, which is shown in brown, still are in operation. It's really just the water line that's come apart. So we've hired actually 2 geotechs, one that we use on most of our land use work, and another one who's more familiar with the history of the slide, to kind of work together and collaborate on that and figure out what's the best approach for monitoring, just to measure the amount of slope and the rate at which it's moving. And we're probably, over time, going to continue to invest in that kind of monitoring before we figure out what's the amount of investment we need to put into this. Is it a kind of slide that we can actually affect? And if so, is that worth the investment in saving the roadway, or do we look at this more as a long-term kind of dead end and termination of this roadway? Obviously, the sewer is important, so we need to. That's one of the only avenues to get it through there. So we're probably going to have to continue to watch this, continue to ask you for funding to help support that system. But right now, I don't have a long-term solution. It's more of we're going to monitor it. We're going to work with our geotechs, and we're hoping it's limited to just the one home.
So just to be clear, the home we're talking about is 13775.
Yeah, 6.
1376.
It's
the one
on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Right
it's inside the slope.
right
I see. I didn't see that.
Yeah, and
so we aren't seeing any trouble with the 2 down in the lower part of the canyon, 13829 and 13826.
Not yet, and we hope not to.
Okay, so down on the lower left of the screen, you have these 2 dark brown SCARP marks. I assume that's what those are.
Yeah, so again, I'm pointing on the screen, so I apologize for that. But this is a mapped historic landslide that has actually, been mapped through the State Geological
for how long?
Society. It's my recollection is that's an ancient landslide. So it's been like that for many years. So a lot of the sliding that we see in the canyon is just like that. It's ancient. It's got a history of moving. They've either documented that through recent observation or through
So my
records.
my question becomes, then how did we allow 3 people to build houses where their lots are literally bisected by an ancient landslide? And I realize that this is not your deal. It didn't happen on your watch. So maybe I'll toss that one to the manager rather than to you.
Well, I mean, we can maybe tag team on it a little bit.
This subdivision was approved in 1993, 94. A lot of the more frequent and more detailed information that we have is through a lot of the LiDAR information that the state has come up with in probably the last 10 years.
Okay.
So better information today than we had 20 years ago.
We would not be allowing homes to be built in these kinds of situations going forward.
So I guess I'll try that one unless Laura wants to. So it's interesting that we actually have an active application, or no, they haven't submitted yet, but we've met with them on 2 vacant lots right here. Same developer who built
Right where?
right here. There's
Well,
2 lots.
That's a great idea.
Right there.
Isn't that right where the?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right in the heat of the battle right there.
How much money they got?
They could build them on skis.
There's often there's often property owners, development community who feel like there's always a solution. Well, usually there is always a solution, but it's a matter of how much is that solution really going to cost. And we're confident that single-family homes on those lots is not going to be a cost-effective investment. And I think the property owner now has seen that. He's been reluctant to see that. He suggested that he's going to still do the study work to do it, but that was before all this happened. And I spoke to his son. He showed up to it. We also had a neighborhood meeting just to try and get in front of this one because with the the determination of a dangerous building, we thought let's try and get in front of this one so that we could notify the property owners that they really probably shouldn't be taking their information from the news media necessarily or news reports and prefer to get in contact with us. So now we've established a contact list and an email list. So we're trying to communicate with them so that they understand what we're up to and don't necessarily take their information from what they're hearing on the news or on Nextdoor or all those other sources that people tend to use. So we did that Friday night with them and it was well attended. But yeah, the other thing is we've got one of the most stringent or progressive geologic hazard codes on the books in the state. So and I haven't studied that necessarily, but I've heard from the geology folks that Oregon City's got us, and for all the right reasons, we're in an area prone to slide. So that didn't exist when these homes were built.
So we prohibit development on slopes over 35%. We severely limit development on slopes between 25 and 35. And then there's also a severe limitation of development on ancient and historic landslides, again, informed using LiDAR data.
Okay. I just don't want to be the guy 30 years from now that people are blaming. Well, why did that dumb guy let people build, down there when everybody knew? So,
well,
there's usually a city engineer, a public works director, a building official, other folks that could probably have to take that blame too. So, yeah, we don't want to be a part of that.
Forced edge, they can't. But let's move on.
Well, actually, I have one more question. Is the house a total loss then? Is it, or is there a way to shore it up?
That's kind of up to the owner to figure out, but we've determined it to be a dangerous building based on what we've seen in the house. And we definitely don't want somebody living in there. The utilities have been disconnected, and the building official has conveyed to me that, really the determination on whether it can be rehabilitated is up to the owner. That's a renter-occupied facility, so there is an owner who may want to do that, but we have not heard from them yet.
So the owner would have to provide information from a geotech as well as a structural engineer to say that the ground is stable and that the house is stable and safe. And then once we receive that, we'll review it, and then it can be occupied.
And then we have our own independent geotech and engineer look at those same things?
Yes, we always verify.
Commissioner O'Donnell, you have something?
No, you touched on that because it brings back some historical references about the applicant brings in their geotechnical engineer. If we have the safeguards in place where we can shortstop that and bring in our own geotechnical, is there a question of timing? Or do we have as much time as we need to respond to that to ensure the safety of our citizens?
We've got adequate time for our third-party review.
That's good. That's what I wanted to hear. The other thing is, are you currently monitoring, even using like surveying equipment where you take elevation readings on known sites that we've had difficulties on in the past?
Some, yes. This one, yes, we are taking that. A lot of it's got to do with the fact that it's, impacting the public right-of-way. Other areas that are actively sliding, it's mostly pictures. We haven't gone to the level of effort for those that are on private property to actually set monuments. A lot of them are moving enough to where they're changing. Forest Edge, for instance, that's changing on a daily basis. So, anything we would have set in terms of survey monuments. We've done some other things that you might not remember, but with the Berry Hill Apartments, we did some photo logs. We had our building department up there checking cracks on foundations, those kind of things, and checking those. And we periodically go back to those.
I was thinking in terms of where Coffee Creek crosses down the back way down toward the falls. Remember, we had to do some repairs there in the past. I was questioning if that was being monitored for settling.
If you're referring to South End Road,
yes, I am.
So South End Road and the South End Hill, it's I would say that's again informal monitoring between the county and the city. We use it mostly, and then the county road department is it's a county. That section of South End Road belongs to Clackamas County.
Okay.
Not to say that it isn't something that we're very in tune to, because obviously the amount of transportation that corridor carries is significant, so we watch it. But again, those are just ongoing, sloughing of the road that we're probably always going to have to maintain because of the way that roadway was built.
And the same thing goes for Telford/Center. There's that piece along the inside curve there that continually drops down, and we have to refill it.
Right.
Also, Mayor, you didn't mention Holcomb area up there. Isn't there a slide thing going on? I didn't see it on your
Yeah,
list.
you're right. I didn't put that one on there. That's another one that we're actually working to get. We're hoping to do that one in-house with working with our geotechnical engineer.
Where's that one at?
It's right above Redland Road on Holcomb. So as you go up the hill,
place that slid a couple years ago.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So I should have had that on the map, because we are working towards the idea is to get a survey done so that we can then figure out how to cut that back, make sure we don't need any easements from the property owners. And
has that eaten at the top of the scarp? Has that eaten into the property owners or into private property owners' property yet?
Not yet. It's really not changed much from what it did originally, and I see that one's much different. I guess that one was a result of overland water flow, a large amount of it, and the way the property owners had channeled that to the slope's edge, it saturated that slope and broke away. It's a shallow set slide. It's kind of sloughing, kind of like what we're seeing on South End, only it happened to be on the upper slope above the road. We had applied for federal funding. We learned that the federal government doesn't necessarily see the slide from the upper onto the roadway as worthy of compensation. If it had taken out the road instead, maybe. So we're trying to figure out how to pay for that and do it in a way that we're not spending a lot of money on consulting and doing it with our street crew.
Okay.
I have a final question. The Holcomb Road slide, does that affect in any way any future transportation plans that are currently being considered?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Peter Skeen, again, just a couple pictures here, but this was a hard one to see. It's kind of remote. It's again on public property. It's on a small tributary to Newell Canyon, very steep. There's lots of, you can see lots of sign of sliding that have happened over the years. And again, it's one of these older developments where I think the original intent was to develop that area, and they kind of platted it and provided easements, but in that effort they moved the utilities to the precarious top edge of this steep slope. So our sewer line was running through there, and I don't know if you can see it in the slide photo, but we lost, I don't know, about 30 feet of pipeline. So we're now bypass pumping using some rented equipment, and we're trying to work on a scope of work with a consultant to put the design together, and we'll have to, again, come back to the commission with ask for some funding to help that repair.
What are we doing for security of that equipment?
It's fenced. It's remote. It's locked. The cabinets on it are locked, so they can't control it from outside the machine, and that's what we've got.
Okay.
This one's one on 14th Street. Again, it's on private property. We've got concerns from properties on the other side of the canyon, but it's again more of a shallow set slide in a deep, steep canyon, and it's not something that is something we're going to pursue in terms of a fix. We're just going to let nature do its business back there. But thought I'd share that one with you in case you heard about it. You're all familiar with this one. This one continues to change on a daily basis. So that's a good
2.5, 3 feet lower than it was when we closed them a year ago.
So the picture on the left is ongoing. The road just continues to kind of move. So yeah, it's several feet of change there. So much so that the storm pipe that was buried is no longer buried, and they've actually plumbed it up and out of the roadway there, so that sort of drains properly. This is
at least to the next crack.
Yeah, to the next crack. And then the picture on the right is just below the Berry Hill Apartments where they're building that wall, and those were the garages. The garages were standing a couple months ago, but not anymore. So lots of slope failures. Some of that's a result of the excavation of the wall up above, which has not been completed. In fact, we've just extended their construction period so they could continue with that. But
I assume they aren't working in this weather up there.
They are not working in this weather right now. And then this one's just a small slide that is affecting a couple of single-family residential properties that are off 12th Street. And this looks different now in that it's all covered. This isn't a recent photo. This is from a year ago. So I think most of this is after the home was built, just terracing of the slope and adding, more weight on there than probably they should have. And so we're working with them to.
So they haven't seen any activity this year?
Well, it's covered, so that's one little problem we have. But
what do you mean it's covered?
So we have had reached out to the geotech on that. So there was a geotech that was approved. They're finishing their permitting with our Natural Resource Overlay District. They covered the slide area with plastic over the winter to make sure that it was safe. So according to the geotech, she's identified that there are no significant movements or any movements that she's aware of at all that's happened over the winter.
Okay. Is that it?
I guess so. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
By the way, that would have gone much quicker if we didn't have all the conversation, but I'm glad that it worked out the way it did.
As long as people are asking questions, I'm okay. Mr. Manager?
So this is, received an email yesterday from, so we have a representative on JPOC. So it's Commissioner Savas as well as Representative Mayor Knapp from Wilsonville. And so one of the goals that the commission identified was to try to
support any additional transportation funding from the legislature that can be brought to deal with the continued underfunding of transportation, not only for maintenance but new projects throughout the state and specifically in the region of which we're a part of. So JPAC has a subset, the C4 Metro Subcommittee, and what they did is they tried to identify projects of importance. There's only X amount of dollars that are available, so how do we prioritize these and then lobby for these together as a region to try to increase the funding opportunities and get some of these projects funded. And so yesterday I received a request. So the subcommittee for JPAC recommended that the JPAC representatives support the funding proposal and priorities that have been identified. And so Metro has put together a resolution that they're considering tomorrow, which identified specific fixes, but it starts with some principles. The first one is that we fix it first. The best value for public investment is maintaining and investing in our existing critical roads and bridges to avoid more costly repairs in the future. Address metropolitan area congestion.
Mr. Manager, can I hold you up there for a
Sure.
second? So, maybe Commissioner Mengelberg, were you in on this C4 subcommittee discussion?
I was not. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I'm not prepared to have an in-depth discussion about this tonight. I think Metro should at least give us, a couple of weeks to digest the information, have an opportunity to discuss. I'd prefer to see this come back to our next work session and have an opportunity to talk about it.
But are they working
I agree.
on this tomorrow, you said, or they got a decision tomorrow? Or you?
I'm not comfortable having them send me something at noon and expecting an answer tonight for us to give to them tomorrow.
I'm in total agreement with that. There's a statement of principles, but I'm curious about the details. I'd really like to delve into it more in depth before I made any decision on it.
I mean, if the county came and asked us the same thing, would we?
No, I agree.
Okay.
I agree. I'm just saying, I thought they're going to make a decision regardless of what we do
Well, I think they
tomorrow.
probably are, and I think a lot of this is a bit of political theater because at the end of the day, it's really up to the legislature, and I think the dynamic in the legislature, at least in my humble opinion, the likelihood of a transportation package coming out of the legislature this year is pretty slim. That might change depending on what happens at the federal level, but I don't think we're going to see anything on the federal level for probably until September or October at the earliest.
So if they go ahead and approve it this week and we don't say either way, we would still have a chance later on if we chose to
Oh yeah,
go
this
with
doesn't.
it. So
This
it
is
does
a totally voluntary thing. What they're really asking for is for our logo to be able
That's
to put
right.
on the letter.
Yeah.
And I'm just not comfortable doing that yet without us having the ability to have a discussion about it.
Agreed.
I'd be
So
fine
let's
with
put
that.
this on the next work session, and we'll move on to your next item.
So we will send out an amended work session agenda for next Tuesday.
Okay.
Is that acceptable?
And Frank, if you need to, we can,
I'm
you
calling
can
in.
attend by phone. Yeah.
I'm calling in.
Okay.
No more surprises.
Okay, thank you. So we'll set that up. And then just lastly, I'm going to be out of the office March 23rd through April 5th. So I'll let you know who's going to be acting city manager in my absence. That concludes my updates for tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Mengelberg.
Let's see. Along with Commissioner Ide, I attended the city's dinner in Estacada and got a great presentation on how proactive they are about recruiting Airbnbs and vacation rentals and more alternative lodging options.
How are they doing collecting their lodging tax from those folks?
They don't have any yet. They're trying to
Oh, okay.
get more because they do have a hotel, but it's not very available for.
Yeah, I know.
It's
Okay.
more like a
That was being
rental.
polite.
So anyway, but they see themselves as a tourism destination or jumping off point for the Clackamas River and all the great stuff they have to do there, and they just don't have a lot of lodging options. So they're being very innovative and creative, and I thought there was some nice groundwork and some pretty proactive approaches that if we wanted to go there as we implement our tourism plan, there's some things to look at as best practices. Also attended the Oregon City Visioning, the Downtown Visioning meeting last night. I thought it was very productive. I'd say there are about 30 or 40 people there-ish, and they had a real innovative clicker system where you could text in numbers and it would provide instant feedback, and then a word puzzle that showed what was most important to people. And convenience and quality and a great experience seemed to be the items that rose to the top from the people that were there. This is all kind of reaffirming and providing direction to the downtown Oregon City efforts. And then finally, I attended the great OCBA meeting yesterday on economic forecasts, and others did as well.
Commissioner Hyde?
Ditto to, I think, all of those. Just a comment, the Downtown Association is hosting the Oregon Main Street Annual Conference this year. I think I mentioned this earlier. But the conference committee is beginning to work on plans to showcase Main Street and Oregon City. So I think that's really exciting. The Moot opening occurred, and I would highly recommend that everyone go over there. It was just really, I was very impressed. I hadn't been there for a long time, and it's just a lot to see. So take your kids.
So was that Saturday?
It was, a week ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And let's see. That's about all I need to say. Other than, are you going to talk about Bill Upton?
Oh, yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Shaw.
All right, so I did attend, on behalf of the commission, the informational meeting on the landslide issue last Friday night. Okay? And, but it was interesting is that I think we had...
Tony didn't want me to go.
Really? Yeah. So yeah, I think there was probably 7 or 8 staff people there. I mean, the amount of staff people and the residents there, I thought this was just a really good public relations thing for all of us here. So that was a good move on your guys' part there. So, and then went to the South Fork, our usual South Fork meeting, OCBA yesterday, and then a couple things. The bistro down at the train depot. If you haven't been down there yet, you need to go see all of Mr. Underwood's work down there. That he had that on his plate for a long time, and is now complete and in use.
Blaine might argue about who did the work, but
I know. Well, I mean, Eric got it to the point where Blaine could take over and make something work there,
right.
And it's quite a facility, and it's actually I think Urban Renewal owns it, or the city. Is it Urban Renewal? Yeah. So even with that, and keep that in mind, it's one of our buildings that we need to really participate in and stuff. So, and use it. If you've got any kind of meetings or things like that you want to do, go down there. So that was real nice. It was we did on behalf of one of our fellow optimists. It's he's 75 years old and heading out on his bicycle from San Diego to Florida. He just left yesterday, and so it was a little fundraising thing for Optimist Club.
Can I add one little thing onto that? Oregon City is going to be nationally known for this because it's going out through the Optimist International that he's going to be traveling across the country. So. And it brings everyone back to the Facebook page here in Oregon City. So
yeah, so it's on a
we're going to be on the national map.
Right. So all the Optimist clubs across the U.S. are recognized.
That's
so
right.
it's pretty cool.
Could have swore we've been on the national map since 1844, but
well, let's say we're refreshing that. How's that?
Okay.
Okay.
In more ways than one.
Yes. And probably lastly, it's kind of interesting. Another one of our creations here in Oregon City with that library over there. I've taken my granddaughter over to the Lego lab on Saturdays, and tell you what, that thing is packed, and it's just amazing what's going on in that building over there. I wish Mo was here tonight too, but it's just that's a great work there. So that's all I got.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, my efforts are a little bit more focused on trying to get input from the community and listening oftentimes as a private citizen, not necessarily as a commissioner, so I've been attending neighborhood meetings. I'll be attending another tomorrow night. Now, when I ran for office, I wanted people to be heard, and if you want us to make decisions based on information from you, be heard. Come here, come to your neighborhood associations, whatever. And I did also attend a planning commission meeting, and I attended that as a private citizen. I didn't feel in any danger of any ex parte contacts because I conducted myself appropriately and just listened. But it's interesting there's a certain benefit to attending the meeting as opposed to watching it on TV. So I'm just trying to gather information to help make good decisions in the future, and as a citizen of this very city. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so I had a couple things. The C4 subcommittee has asked to do a kind of a general discussion with the county attorney about bylaws. So I went to that inaugural meeting last week. I attended South Fork Water Board. On that note, I will be gone probably most of the last 2 weeks of June to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and then to Philadelphia for the South Fork AWWA or something like that. I typically have like a once a month meeting with Councilor Johnson from Gladstone. We just get together and talk about general politics in the county and what's good for Oregon City and Gladstone. So we spent a couple hours talking about those kinds of things. I've had a couple meetings with different developers looking at stuff around Oregon City and talking about the kinds of things that they want, and me asking questions about how we can facilitate that kind of development as we move forward. I heard an interesting comment from one of our major business owners, one of the 5 50-plussers. And that is they're having a hard time finding, and I find this hard to believe, but having a hard time finding entry-level people. And we're not talking about a skill set beyond, upright breathing, having graduated from high school, doesn't have a criminal record. So I'm curious why. I guess I would like to hear from some folks why are we having a shortage of those kinds of folks that our employers can't fill entry-level positions. So maybe that's a discussion we can have with the school district and the community college.
And those employers too. I mean, they're
yeah.
They probably
and I hesitate to mention the name out loud because it was just sort of an off-the-cuff conversation on some other things that we were talking about business. I've met with Tony a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. We typically talk on the phone at least 3 times a week. While you guys have your regular, once or twice a month meetings with him, we converse quite more often most of the time. Beyond that, that's about all that's been going on with me. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Actually, there is one other thing. I want to give Captain Clure a chance. I know that I have received a couple of requests for an inclusionary ordinance or zoning, or not zoning, but a resolution or a sanctuary type policy for the city. Can you tell us what happened, what you guys do, and what the process is if you were to stop someone and arrest them, let's say for drunk driving?
Are you talking about sanctuary city scenario?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
What's the extent of the investigation when you stop somebody?
We do not ask for their status. We simply do the investigation and book them into the county jail. And then they do the APHIS part at the county jail as far as fingerprints and IDing and positive IDing.
We don't use acronyms here.
I'm sorry? APHIS? It's the fingerprint process. I'm
Okay,
not sure
there you go.
The fingerprint process. So they APHIS the person, which takes their fingerprints and confirms that they are the person they told us they are. So we don't get involved in the deciding or questioning their status.
So we don't have, once you guys turn somebody over to the county, then from that on, the rest of that case is handled by the county corrections and by the court system.
Correct.
The only thing we would do is one of you guys would go testify if there was a trial or a hearing or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we have no decision-making capability about whether to or not to talk to ICE or any other federal authority unless there is an active deportation order or warrant for their arrest.
Yeah, the only time there's a terrorism hit, you'll get once in a while hit, meaning if you run somebody, you'll get a terrorism hit. Once in a while it says call terrorism office, call ICE, and notify them that you had contact with this person so they can kind of track that person.
Sure.
But there's no proactive role that we do to identify individuals. The jail does it when they get to the jail, unless they have some kind of warrant for their arrest that says, call ICE and detain him. And then we're just following orders by a judge that says do X, Y, and Z.
All right. So I'm gonna take just a minute and explain why I asked Captain Clear that question. We've had some folks come at our last meeting, and I've had three emails from individual citizens in Oregon City asking us to pass either an ordinance or a resolution to the effect that either Oregon City is a sanctuary city like Portland or something else along those lines. I'm here, my job and the job of my fellow commissioners is to represent the citizens of Oregon City. And given the current political climate in the United States and the fact that we have several large projects that are coming up in the next 5 or 6 years that will require the cooperation of our federal partners, it seems imprudent to me that we would pick a fight with the administration when we very well could need their cooperation down the road. And seeing as unlike many cities around, we don't really have a serious problem with either legal or illegal immigrants, depending on how you look at that. It doesn't seem productive to me, and the sense I get from my fellow commissioners to them that we pull that particular tiger's tail if we don't need to. So that's where I'm at. It has nothing to do with the base issue itself. I think Oregon City is an inclusive place. There was a racial incident at the high school 3 months ago. I don't remember exactly when, and the student body itself stood up and railed against that kind of injustice. So I think that Oregon City is an inclusive place, and people get along well. And I don't know that we have. Would you say we have any more or less, quote, racial or religious incidents than surrounding communities?
I don't think we have anything. No, I don't think there's any more than any others we
Okay.
come across.
So that's the only comment I have to make. Feel free to send me an email and tell me how wrong I am. But at this point in time, my focus is helping us move forward economically, and I believe the Willamette Falls Legacy Project is going to be a huge key portion of that. And I don't want to do anything that might risk us getting any money from any source to help us get that project done. Does anybody else have a comment on that subject, or Commissioner Shaw?
Well, I think that we all like to operate on certainty when we're up here. And there's no certainty on all of this. This
Right.
is all up in the air. What is certain is that we've got some projects going on here, and they're moving forward, and that's certainty. But the rest of it, whether it's a sanctuary city or loss of federal funds and all these threats, that's just not certain. And that's what I like to operate, is on certainty when I'm up here. So,
Okay. Anybody else?
I support your position on this, Mayor. I also have trouble with passing a resolution that says we shouldn't obey our own laws.
Amen.
Okay.
I'll totally agree with that last statement. I'm confident in the equal protection under the law. I'm confident in the Constitution of the United States. I'm confident in the separation of powers and what that entails, and not allowing any one branch of government to get out of control or any one individual. And I'm very comfortable with all the laws that already exist, and I believe you either obey the laws or you choose not to. You don't selectively do it. So I support your position.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? We're adjourned.